Sound speeds. Great. B rolls. A rolls. C rolls. Okay, this is the Wilco Troy interview. Mark. Okay. We're just going to go through basically everything that we've already talked about this week.
Okay.
So, you've already thought about it, you've already answered a lot of these questions. But,
Right, sure.
Also, this gives us a chance to have a little bit concise answers. I don't want you to be thinking of, like, I have to be, like, short in my answer, but given that you've already thought about it, I might make this a little bit punchier.
Okay, hopefully.
But there's no pressure to be concise necessarily. What motivates you to mentor people at the Dream Center?
Well, what motivates me to mentor people at the Dream Center would probably be I liked being mentored. I liked having men that spoke into my life, and so having an opportunity to encourage other men in their walk and in their life is an honorable or a honorable may not be the right word, but it means a lot to me. It means a lot to be able to love on people. Everybody wants to be loved. Everybody wants to be affirmed. Everybody wants to be well thought of. And some men, through either mistakes of their own or events that happen in their life, they don't get a lot of that. And so I want to have the opportunity to be that to them, and give a word of encouragement, see them succeed.
Yeah, love it. I don't really want to ask this question, but yeah, then we won't.
Now you're going to make me wonder what the question was.
Well, I debated whether it's relevant to talk about Brian,
Right.
And that story, and how, the whole reason that I would ask about that is, regardless of the outcome, you still are going to care for people.
Sure. Yeah.
And it doesn't always come out the way that you want it to.
Right.
But I also realize that that's fresh.
Yeah.
And might be uncomfortable to talk about.
Yeah.
I guess all of this is probably uncomfortable to talk about.
Yeah, for sure.
I'd rather save the uncomfortableness for what this is really about, not the difficulties of mentoring someone.
Yeah.
So let's skip that and go to tell us about the military. Tell us about how you injured your back and what did you find in the military that was a missing piece, or did it give you purpose? Did it give you a framework for living?
Well, I think joining the military was always kind of my focus. I think I always wanted to follow in my dad's footprints and serve my country, and older brothers who did the same. And so I wanted to be able to serve. I didn't know what I would find once I went in. There is a major difference between joining the Army, the Marine Corps, the Navy, or the Air Force, and how you're treated. And I was always told, if you want to get an education, go in the Air Force or the Navy. And so I followed my dad's footsteps and went into the Air Force. And I didn't really expect to find purpose and meaning, but I really did find a place where I felt like I belonged, where I had something to contribute. That my position, albeit ever so small, as an E2, E3, when I got to my first duty station, that's pretty low on the totem pole. But I answered to full colonels and chief master sergeants, and that was a real honor. Working with the B-1 bomber was huge. Loved every bit of being part of the munition maintenance and munitions control aspect of it, and so it just really was extremely rewarding. And my intention was to serve a full 20 and retire from the Air Force. I didn't have any intention of getting out. I felt like it would be a great career for me, and I didn't have a whole lot of education before I dropped out of high school so I could marry Amy. And so, of course, I had to go back and get a high school diploma, not a GED, in order to go in the Air Force, and I did so. So it took me a little bit longer to get in than I wanted to, but it was all, well worth it. And, unfortunately, we had a flight line incident where I injured my back and ruptured several discs in my lower back and middle of my back, a couple of my neck, and so that pretty much set me on the road to getting out. I was hospitalized too long that they would have to retrain me in order for me to catch up to where the squadron had gone to, just because the B-1 was so new. And we were, I was on the ground floor of the B-1 arriving at Dyess Air Force Base, and so we were actually the squadron, the building was new, all the equipment was new, and so we're actually entering everything into the computer. And so whenever I got injured and spent, month in the hospital at Dyess, 6 months at Lackland Air Force Base, it ended up where I would have to be retrained, which meant that I probably wouldn't be at the B-1 anymore. And so that was heartbreaking to me, because I really loved what I was doing, and I begged for them to let me go back. I can catch up, but they didn't feel like I physically could handle my job anymore. And so, that kind of forced me out. I got a medical retirement because of it, so, which was not at all what I wanted. I wanted to spend my life serving my country. But the military was probably one of, outside of marrying your mother, it was one of the most, one of the best decisions I've ever made, I think.
Yeah. I'm going to cover the next one. Yeah, so then after the military, was it hard for you to get a job or find a career out of the military?
Well, it was hard for me to work after I got out of the military because of my injury, and so and then I had to have surgery, which took me out of the ability to use my right leg for a year. And so, I was on crutches, and I couldn't really work. And I did work in an auto parts store, and they let me sit on a bar stool, if you will, and just wait on customers as they came in. But that didn't last very long, because they realized I wasn't really an asset. I couldn't go get the part. Once I figured out what the person needed, I needed help, or I crutch along to get a starter, and that's way too heavy to carry while you're on crutches. And so, it was hard to get a job. And then after my injury was over with, then it was hard because I didn't have a history of employment, because I had been out of employment for so long. And so that was difficult to get employment. In fact, I actually went to California for rehab, and Amy and I lived out in California, maybe 3 or 4 months, the last 3 or 4 months of my rehab, until the doctors released me to put weight on my leg, full weight. And so then I was able to go, okay, I want to go back to Texas and get a job, and I did, and that's where I got the job at Dell's Auto Parts. So.
Yeah, I remember the story of you driving to California.
Yeah.
And then wedging your cane on the accelerator.
Oh, I found a stick on the side of the road. The cane was too long. I found a stick on I slammed on the brakes and pulled over because my leg was cramping from trying to hold on the gas pedal, and I didn't have cruise control. And so I got out of the car and hobbled along and angry, and I found a stick on the floor, and I went in my car and put it between the gas pedal and my seat, moved my seat up just enough to get me going 70, and put my foot out the window, and I got cruise control. Yeah, it's innovative, whatever you got to do, right? Yeah.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah, okay. So now, walk us through, like, you're in a stable career, and then events that happened that led up to the phone call.
Right. Do you want me to wait till you're able to move, or do you want me to?
Oh, no, you're good.
Okay,
Yeah, thank you.
I don't know if you're going to cross in front. Yeah, so after I got back to Austin, went to work at Dale's Auto Parts out in Cedar Park, and subsequently, I think it might have been the first part of '91. I think that Dale's Auto Parts had to close, and the manager and I and one other were kind of given an option. So either we could take kind of a severance pay and walk away and get unemployment, or we could go to another store, but we wouldn't have the same position. And so at the time I was young, and my manager, Big Tom, was a bachelor, and he was like, hey, we could take unemployment and go fishing. It's a perfect time for fishing. It's March. And so we took unemployment and, went out to, Travis Lake and went fishing. And I did that probably 6 weeks or so. And then, I wanted to work. I was so bored. And so got a couple of jobs, at different places to do auto parts. It was kind of, I loved parts. I loved working on stuff. And so I did end up getting a job at another auto parts store, which really dealt more with big trucks, 18-wheelers. And that was a whole new ball of wax and stuff that I had never really known about, but it was interesting to me. And subsequently didn't quite work out there with the management, and half of that's my fault because I was young, and I had an idea of how I thought things should run because I'd managed a store or assistant managed a store before, and so it was like, if we did this, we could make more money, and probably wasn't smart for me to, get in the owner's face about that, and so I ended up leaving that job, and then I decided I would go to tech school or to ITT and learn electronics and try to develop a new career. And I'm colorblind, and so that kind of went south, about 4 months into it. And so I went back to auto parts. And so finally I got a job at Dale's Auto Parts, and or I'd applied for a new job at Dale's Auto Parts for assistant manager. And that was about the same time that this accusation came against me, where, first off, I was arrested, the week before for possession of a marijuana pipe, and then I ended up being called in. I want to say it was a Monday morning that I got the phone call for me to come in, and the Round Rock Police Department wanted to talk to me, and I obviously had no idea what it was about, but I figured it was about drugs. Williamson County was known, especially in the 90s, being very strong on drugs. I mean, people knew that, if you're transporting drugs, don't go down I-35 in Williamson County. And so I was afraid, but I really wasn't too afraid because I just got caught with a marijuana pipe. I mean, that's a misdemeanor, and they weren't going to really get anything on me. So I didn't really understand why I was being called in, but I went in anyway. And so when I went in, they put me in a room and handed me a piece of paper and told me that you need to answer the questions that are on the other side of that paper. And I'm like, okay, what's this about? Just answer the questions, you'll figure it out. So they left the room, and I flipped the page over, and as soon as I read the first couple of questions, I realized this is not about marijuana. This is about something that happened to a little girl. And so I didn't fill out the questions. I was like, I'm just waiting for them to open the door up so I can tell them I'm leaving. We're not doing this. And so when they came back in, I told them that, I'm not answering these questions. I don't know what this is about, but, I'm ready to leave. If I'm under arrest, put me under arrest, but if I'm not, I'm leaving. And they were like, yeah, you can leave. You're certainly welcome to leave. You're not being, detained. Although, before you hit the front door, I'll be sure that I've got a police officer right around the corner from your wife's house, and so they'll snatch those children out of your hands. You won't see them again. They'll be in foster care until this is resolved. So you can decide whether you want to sit here and go ahead and answer our questions, and we'll get this over with today, or you can, lose your kids for a while. And I'm like, okay, all right, I can't let Amy have to go through that. So flipped the page back over. They walked out, and I answered their questions. And that kind of started the hours-long interview, and the questions that they told me that I was guilty simply because I came in to talk to them. And when I said I thought it was something about the marijuana. Oh, so you've been arrested for marijuana? We didn't realize that. And I'm like, oh, well, no, great. Now I'm on a double radar, for Williamson County. And so, things started going really south in that interview, almost off the get-go. And I didn't know, today we have, Law and Order and NCIS and all those different law shows that kind of educate people on what their rights are, what to say when when you're approached by an officer, and what not to say, and all that. And I didn't realize the thing to say is I want an attorney. I just kept saying I want to leave because I didn't think I needed an attorney. I didn't do anything wrong. So, but you guys are twisting everything I say. The fact that I came in, they say was a sign that I was guilty of the crime. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. Police asked me to come in. Why wouldn't I come in? They're the police. They asked me to come in. I don't have a problem going in to talk to law enforcement. I think that's the civic thing to do. So, and I don't know how far we want to go into this, as far as, all the different things, the tricks that they, I now call tricks. I didn't understand what they were doing at the time, but, they kept talking to me over and over and asking me different questions, and I kept telling them, I don't know how many times I can answer that question if you're expecting the answer to be different. But, the great thing about telling the truth is you don't have to remember what you said, because the truth is the truth. And so I just kept answering their questions. And finally, he was like, okay, tell you what we'll do. If you will go across the street, there's a place called MHMR. If you'll go across the street, I'll call ahead, let them know you're coming. And it may cost you about $80, but you talk to somebody over there, and if they deem you not a threat to society, I'll drop this right now. We won't pursue it any further. We'll just drop the case. And I'm like, okay, so first off, I don't know where I'm gonna come up with $80, but I don't have a problem talking to somebody. So I don't mind going over and talk to anybody you want me to talk to, because I got nothing to hide. So and I'm ex-military. We've all dealt with mental health people. I got a pretty high security clearance. I've been interviewed. I've taken those tests. I'm okay. And he said, oh, well, now that you've said that you're willing to go, that's another sign that you're guilty, because only a guilty man would go across the street and talk to somebody at mental health. And I was like, how does that work? You just got through telling me that we could end this. You wouldn't take my children away from me if I would just go across the street. It's like, well, only a guilty person would say that, would agree to something like that. I'm like, okay, so, and only a guilty person would have filled out that paperwork. An innocent person would have never filled out that paperwork. I'm like, well, again, the police asked me to fill out paperwork, and you threatened to take my children away, so why wouldn't I? Well, that's irrelevant, And so I don't really know how many hours I was in there. I went in there in probably between 9:30 and 10 in the morning, and it was close to supper, nightfall before Amy and I got out of there. And ultimately, they said, well, I tell you what we'll do. We'll let you go, but we're going to call Amy in, and she's going to need to bring your oldest son, and I told them what his name was, and they're like, okay, well, we can bring him in, and we'll talk to Amy and him, and provided that there's nothing alarming to us, you can go home. But you're going to get charged for this. You can rest assured we're going to charge you for it. I was like, how in the world can you charge me for this? You've got no evidence that I ever did anything. I didn't do anything. How could you? Well, we have evidence. You've confessed already 3 times. And I'm like, because I agreed to come in. This is crazy, guys. You know, okay, well, if that's what we need to do to keep my children with my wife, then that's fine. I don't have a problem with you going to talk to my son. So I called, or they called, I think, called Amy and said, you know, come up here, leave Mason at home, which is our youngest son. And so we left him at home with a neighbor who often watched the boys when Amy and I had things to do. And so they brought John up there, and as soon as we got there, they took John in another room without Amy and without me. And you know, that was alarming to us. We're like, you know, but we didn't know what our rights were. You know, we're 25 years old. We don't have any idea what's right or wrong. And so they, once they put him in another room, they came back into me and said, okay, you can come in here. And Amy was sitting in that room. And he brought me in and he said, I'll let you guys chat. But just so you know, Miss Mansfield, he's already confessed 3 times, so he's guilty of this crime. I was like, I did not confess to this. Yeah, I'll let you guys work it out. And he walked out of the room. And of course, Amy's looking at me like, what's going on? You know, and what, you confessed? What? And I explained to her what they were saying about confessing. She was like, we got to get out of here. So they talked to John and found obviously nothing of a concern for them. And so they let us out. And so that kind of ended that police interview stage of our nightmare that I thought would just simply die because there wasn't anything there, but they're like a dog with a bone.
Yeah. So then you get, I think we'll just work through it chronologically. I think that's working nice. Then we get an attorney, which I think we've sufficiently covered. And then it's court, you know, trial, date set, plea, offer. When would they offer those pleas? Was it like, because I know a lot of times it's like 30 minutes before, a couple hours before or something.
Yeah, it was right before we go into the, you know, and for, they didn't really, I don't recall them offering me anything when we were at pretrial. So that's kind of when you're presenting, I guess now I know, didn't then, but that's where your defense is permitting or submitting motions, you know, asking for either discovery or asking for exculpatory evidence to be revealed. Or and my attorney did exactly that. Stephen C. Hall out of Victoria was, I thought, was very thorough in his seeking to know what the strength of the case of the state of Texas was. And so he had asked for all those things, you know, within the first month of a month and a half of us being in there. But it wasn't until we started setting the dates for jury trial. And so, and I think it was 7, maybe at 8 times that we were set for jury trial. I'd have to go back and look again, but we were set for trial, and you know, we'd be set to go in the office at, you know, or in the court at, you know, 9:30, and at 9 o'clock the DA would come to my attorney and say, hey, we're willing to go ahead and settle this morning. We don't have to go to trial. We'll give him, you know, 99 years to life in prison. So, like, well, you know, Troy ain't gonna take that. I can tell you that for sure. And so that ended that one. And then, you know, the next time it was 25 years in prison. You know, I think after that, there may have been a couple of other times where they tried to keep offering the same thing, 25 years. They went down to maybe 15. They went down to 10. Then they went down to 6 months shock. So for 6 months, you got to go to Huntsville TDC, and you got to serve in general population for 6 months. That's not happening. I'm not leaving my family. I didn't do anything wrong. You know, I'm not going to jail. So you can forget it. My wife was a stay-at-home mom taking care of 2 little boys, and she's not working. So no, we're not doing that. And while this is all going on, you know, I go from assistant manager of a store, which was the first job that I took, to within 90 days, I'm offered a managership of the store that I was at. and the manager moved on to another store where he could build it and make it, a profitable store. And then maybe 6 months after that, so 9 months into this, I got offered another store because I had brought that one out of the red and into the black. And so he moved me to another store that was really struggling. And so, again, brought it from in the red into the black, and trimmed some fat in it and helped it look good. So I was being successful, and I was making more money than I had made in previous years. So we were certainly on a good trajectory for, in my mind, I was seeking to be either a regional or a general manager at some point over multiple stores to help managers be able to do what I was already doing. And so I really thought that was going to be a career. The auto parts store, the owner, I think his name was Ken Smith. He knew what I was dealing with. Kurt Felbert, I think, was the general manager at the time. He knew what I was dealing with in the court system, and they were, totally behind me. Don't worry about it. I'm sure this is going to blow over. It's not a big deal. I'm sure this is, it's, we know you, so we're not worried about it. So don't worry about it. So, I was set for a good career, I thought, and the idea of me taking a break to go to jail was ridiculous, and the thought of not being there for my wife and my children was more devastating to me than me losing my own life or cutting off a limb. It was like I can't be without my wife and my kids, and I didn't suspect they could be without me. So I kept saying no to every deal they offered until. I think he was an assistant U.S. attorney out of Dallas, Michael Juergens. He came to Dallas as a DA or assistant DA, first chair, I think. I don't remember if he was first chair at the time, but anyway, he came in and kind of took over my case because Richard Branson, who was my attorney or my DA, quit abruptly. So in July, when we were set to go in for our jury trial, another plea was offered. But at the same time, we were canceling or getting a continuance because what we were told, my attorney told me, was that the prosecutor had disappeared. He was absent without leave. We have no idea where he is. He just didn't show up for work. And so we don't know what's going on, but we don't have anybody take your case, so we're going to ask for a continuance. Subsequently, learning more about Richard Branson after my exoneration, he wasn't that kind of man. He would not have left without giving a reason for his leaving, and he was a man of, everybody that I've talked to, a man of integrity, and I don't think he would have stood by and let somebody hide exculpatory evidence when the judge ordered it less than a month, well, maybe a little bit more than a month before he left. So the judge signed that order that we submitted back in October. It wasn't until the 16th of May or 17th of May that he signed that order and said, you need to turn over all exculpatory evidence, which forced Richard Branson to go and interview the supposed victim. And when he interviewed the victim, he wrote in his own handwriting, this is not a winnable case. The little girl said nothing happened. At one point she said, Mr. Mansfield didn't do anything to me. So, we're going to have to dispose of this case because we can't take it to trial. Maybe we can get him to accept a plea. And so I guess, I don't really know what happened. I've always wondered what happened, but unfortunately, Richard Branson passed away, I think, in 2010. And so, but he left and went to Galveston, where he had come from. As far as from a DA's office, he went back there to serve on the appellate court. So he wanted to deal with people who were either wrongfully convicted or felt like they were, and he wanted to review those cases to ensure that no injustice had actually happened. I just, wonder what prompted him to do that. Was it serving under Ken Anderson, a man who's been found guilty now of hiding exculpatory evidence in more than one case. I don't know. But so this new ADA came in, Michael Juergens, and he told my attorney that morning, 15 minutes before we were going to walk in, that I either accept the plea that's on the table, which is 10 years probation, 120 days weekend jail time, 500 hours community service, $1,500 restoration or restitution, which I didn't really understand what that was about. But if I'd agree to that, then they would dismiss the case. If I didn't agree to that, he's going to take it to trial and he'll make sure that they put me under the jail. And his words to my attorney, which I didn't learn until later, was that, we in Williamson County, there are two kinds of people we don't like, and that's drug dealers and baby effers. My attorney told me sex offenders, but later at his own deposition for my case, he revealed that was not what was said, but instead what was said that he called me a baby effer. And so I was at an impasse. I'm in a county where they have a 100% conviction rate. They're telling us they have all kinds of evidence against me that didn't make any sense. All of it seemed, now in retrospect, all of it to me was circumstantial. Now that I've watched Law and Order, and studied law, it's clear that all they had was, according to them, all they claimed to have was a video of the girl describing in graphic detail what had happened to her and that I was the one who did it. And that they had a doctor who confirmed the very things that she was saying had happened to her had actually happened. So, they according to them, they had me dead to rights, but they're willing to let me off with 10 years probation and 120 days weekend jail time. And so in a county that typically puts people under the jail for these types of crimes. I didn't know that. My attorney didn't really understand, but he was being told that's what we have. And so, but we're willing to be easy. You've lost our other DA. We'd have to kind of restart this whole thing over again. And so the new DA coming in is telling you take the deal today and we'll just brush it under the rug. You don't take it, you're out of here. We'll put you under the jail. And so in that 15-minute window, we decided to go ahead and accept the plea and get this, what I thought was behind us. Part of the deal was that I had to register as a sex offender. And at the time in November of 94, I think it was, or 93, the registering as a sex offender, what I was told in court was that simply mean that the police knew of my plea or conviction, and that they were the only ones who could know, and the only way that the public would find out if somebody was able to show just cause as to why they need to know, if I'm, let's say, applying at a daycare. Okay, so they need to have that background check. And I wasn't planning on applying at daycare. I had a job at Dale's Auto Parts, and so as a manager of a store, my second store managing. So I felt like I had, okay, maybe I can salvage, my position. Unfortunately, wasn't able to. I lost my job within probably less than a month after the conviction, and so through no fault of my own, but simply because I was convicted of this crime, and so we can't have somebody like that working for us, even though they supported me throughout the whole process, and I don't hold that against them. I know that it's a public store, and a manager is a person out front, the face of the store, and so I got what they did. I just didn't like it. So we ended up taking that plea, and yeah.
Yeah, I think a piece to talk about. It's one thing that I want to, Justice Donnelly mentioned it whenever I was talking to him, was the whole bait and switch of like, this is what you're getting, as far as like no contest.
Right.
But then upon actually going to a trial court, right? What is it?
Sentencing?
Sentencing, yeah. Upon going into sentencing, everything shifts
Yeah.
And so I'm going to have him build that out a little bit more, but I think it'd be good to share. What your intentions or what your understanding was going in, and then what they said that you agreed to.
Yeah, that's a difficult thing for me because I don't. I'll be real honest. I don't remember I don't remember knowing that I wasn't pleading no contest. When I found out that I pled no contest or that I pled guilty when I thought it was a no contest was at exoneration. That's when I discovered that, because I even told my attorney, I said, well, wait a minute, it says here that I pled guilty to this. I didn't plead guilty to it. I pleaded no contest to it. And she goes, no, they have you down as pleading guilty. And I said, well, when we talked about it, we were saying that I'm not admitting that I did this because I didn't do this. So I'll plead no contest to it, but I'll take the plea. And she said, well, it came across as guilty, and I didn't catch that at the sentencing or I didn't catch that till it was all over with. I didn't. I always thought I pled no contest. I always thought I kind of thought maybe that was why they were not letting me or not making me allocate, was because I had pled no contest. That was what was kind of going on in my mind. It was the reason why I stood there whenever the judge says, I'm going to need you to allocate. I need you to tell me exactly what you did, how you did it, give me the details. And I was like, yeah, I'm not going to allocate. And then my attorney spoke up and said, Judge, we're waiving allocation. And Judge Carter was like, really? And he looked over at Michael Juergens and said, you all right with that? He goes, yeah, Judge, we're all right with that. He was like, okay, all right, fine with me. Let's move on. So in my mind at the time, I thought I was pleading no contest. I did not, maybe I saw that on the paperwork that it said guilty, but I didn't put two and two together, to be honest with you, until Kristen Eder told me that. As I remember talking to her about that, I was like, I thought I pled no contest. I don't understand the difference between the two. And she was like, there is no difference between the two. Or there is a big difference between the two, and you did not plead no contest. They have you down as pleading guilty. So, it was certainly a bait and switch, but unfortunately, at 25 years old, I didn't catch the switch. It didn't, I didn't catch that switch until later.
Cool. Good. Those, if you can remember, the 2 weeks after conviction.
Right.
What was that like? I mean, the surrealness of it, the weight or the gravity of it, or I imagine once you lost your job, that was really the
yeah. Yeah, the time between taking your plea and the sentencing is a little bit over a month, and during that time you go to pre-sentencing interviews where they're determining your home situation, where do you live, your employment, all those kinds of things, and whether or not you have any kind of a drug history where you need to be in a rehab program. And of course, like I said earlier, I got arrested for a marijuana pipe, and so I needed to do 6 months of aftercare program or whatever it was. Go in once a week for a group drug and alcohol and attend AA. I think for a while there it was weekly, and then it went to once a month that I had to be at AA, and so that was one more thing that I had to fit into my schedule of things to do. So that month was, well, first off, was shocking, just all the different things that I had to do and the different things that I had to talk about. But I do remember talking to Miles, I think that may have been his last name, but he was the pre-sentencing officer who kind of did your interview, and I remember him telling me, you can't, you're not going to be able to successfully do this when you're saying you didn't do it. You're at some point before you get off probation, you're going to have to admit that you did this. Otherwise, you'll never get off probation. And I said, well, I guess I'll never get off probation. That I didn't do it, so I'm not going to admit to that. And so that's another thing that we didn't find out till after my exoneration, that my pre-sentencing detailed the fact that I was not saying I was guilty of the crime. So to me, that lined up with no contest. But for them to take a guilty plea with me at pre-sentencing saying that I didn't do it, and that the two didn't gel, and so it seemed like to me that, nothing against Judge Carter, but I wish he would have caught it. I wish he would have been able to, I don't want to call it a good old boy system, but I wish he wouldn't have trusted the DAs and would have looked up and done his job, which his job is. That's a safeguard that we have out there, that a judge is supposed to make sure that the person who's pleading guilty is actually guilty, and the way they do that is they force you to allocate. And so he never forced me to allocate. So there is that. Afterwards, once I got my sentencing and all of that, and that kind of ball rolling, my first interview with probation officer, and and the weekend jail time, and all of that. As a manager of a store, very difficult to get a weekend jail time. Go in, set the store up, run to the county, serve your 8 hours of that, and then go back to the store and close it. It's the only way I could be able to do that, to justify I'm not here at work. And so, yeah, it was very hectic. It was very difficult. And of course, I'm probably in shell shock. I'm just, I can't believe what has happened to us. I'd already had an altercation with a neighbor who had punched me, come across the street and smacked me pretty good. That was, the whole thing was just devastating to go through, and I can't really put into words the feelings that I had, other than I felt very alone, trapped. I couldn't see a light at the end of this proverbial tunnel, and then within a month later, I get released from my job, and find every auto parts store I go to that's not going to hire me because I have to put down that I'm a felon. And then, when you put down a felon, they ask you what type of crime, and the moment you tell what type of crime, even though there wasn't any internet at the time, or at least we didn't have it, and there certainly wasn't a website for registered sex offenders at the time, it still shut every door that I went to. So, yeah, it sent Amy and I into a tailspin pretty bad. I had heard, of course we're editing so we can take whatever we want to out of it. I had heard Amy say the other day that when we took the plea, we recognized that I went from guilty to no contest to guilty, and I didn't, that wasn't, I didn't see that. So I haven't talked to her about that, but I don't know if that's just I don't know what that is as far as memory is concerned. But I do know that whenever I found out, my response was to my attorney, Kristen Eder, that I didn't think I was pleading guilty to this. So, yeah.
Yeah. What, and it doesn't have to be an incident. What do you feel like was the most challenging piece of all of this? Post-conviction. Was it the community response to, or the damaging of your your name? Mm-hmm. Was it not being able to find a job, or figuring out how to protect your family? Yeah. What do you feel like was the most challenging piece of all of this?
I think probably the most challenging piece of all of this, and it's hard because I've got two or three. I think the first one was that they kept moving the bar. They kept changing the law about registered sex offenders. They wanted to put a tag on your license plate so that anyone could tell from just looking at your license plate that you're a registered sex offender. They went to postcards being sent out to your neighbors all around you so that everybody would know where you live and what you're supposedly, on probation or parole or whatever for. It's a really hard thing to articulate when you feel guilty for something you didn't do. If everybody's looking at you as if you're this horrible person that did this despicable thing, yet you didn't do it. But, if everybody looks at you a certain way, it doesn't take long before you start looking in the mirror wondering, man, am I just a really, not that did I do it, but am I, that is the image that I now have. I can't, and especially with the internet, the more the internet grew, the worse this thing got. I mean, we got to the point where you could Google my name and, my sex offender registration came up and where I lived and every aspect of my life was out there on the internet. So it was very difficult. Well, first off, getting a job, forget it. I couldn't get a job. Nobody would hire me. And the longer this went on, the more difficult it was to get a job. Even in the fact that we started our cleaning business so that we could have a job. And we started it in Amy's name because, my name wasn't attached to it, and we worked it as a family, so we didn't really do anything wrong there. But even as the internet grew, more and more people were able to find me even through her. And we lost several very big, very good accounts for no other reason than the fact that they had looked us up and didn't want someone of that character in their establishment. And when we're talking about establishment, we're talking about a micro chip company. We won't name them, out of Georgetown, and all I did was went in the middle of the night and it didn't go in alone. Amy and I and you and your brother went in and we cleaned. Their clean rooms and their offices, and we vacuum. And so there's no contact with people. There's nobody there when we're doing the work. Every once in a while there might be somebody closing up or whatever, but we lost that job because, they looked us up. They didn't like they knew pretty early on, but they didn't like the fact that it became more and more known within the company. And more people were like, I don't even want that guy cleaning my desk and being able to see the pictures of my kids, kind of thing. It's like, oh, yeah. So, yeah. The bar kept moving, and it became more and more difficult to live the life, even after probation's over with. 2003, my probation ended, and this nightmare continued. The Texas legislation kept changing the laws on different things that registered sex offenders had to do, and sheriff coming to my house on a monthly basis. I need to physically see you. I need you to come outside and wave at me. I'm like, it just, I think that was the biggest part of it, without, having Amy sticking with me and the relationship that her and I developed with our kids and being such a close-knit family, and serving the Lord at the same time. We got saved about 8 months after this all happened, and so that completely changed our outlook on things. I was able to see that even though I'm in this dark place, there's a light at the end of this proverbial tunnel, and that light would be that one day all this is going to get turned around somehow or another, and I might be dead when it happens. But, at one point or another, by my actions and by my love for the Lord, I'm going to be absent from this body and present with him. So I'm just going to stay true to him and keep my focus and be who I'm called to be. I preached on the radio for 4 or 5 years, 4.5 years, and I used my name, wasn't afraid of what people could Google and find out about me. I am who I am, and I'm not worried about what people thought, but it still weighed on your mind. Put your head on your pillow and think about the things that people must be either saying or thinking about your wife, saying or thinking about your own children, and all because I took a plea. Yeah, all of that weighs pretty heavy on me. So there's so many different aspects of this that were increasingly difficult throughout the years.
I'm curious about, given the solace that you found in church, and how difficult was it to get kicked out of, feel free to share different stories. I'm all about Anne Lamott, like, if they want us to talk nicely about them, they should have acted nicely. So, you don't have to drop names, but, there's some pretty brutal things that people have done in the church to our family.
Yeah.
And so, maybe share 1 or 2 instances of that. And then also just kind of how did you reconcile that with the hope that you found in faith, but then being met with the reality of humans
Right.
amidst that, and in public opinion?
Yeah, having my relationship with the Lord early was my saving grace for me. A lot of people say that people use Jesus as a crutch. I used him as a walker, so I couldn't walk without him in this life, and so he was everything to me, and my relationship with him was everything to me. And I wanted to serve in church, whether it be the janitor, cleaning up the place, or whether it be teaching a Sunday school class or men's ministry. I was part of the prison ministry team. A bunch of different aspects of church life that I was involved in. And early on in our Christian walk, and in this time of serving probation, the early part of it was pretty easy. Pastor Randy Felshaw, which was my pastor now at One City Church there in Beaumont, he was my pastor that I got saved under in Austin, and he was extremely supportive, and talked to me often about integrity and the different things that you, Troy, are going to be held to a standard much higher than anybody else that you're going to come across, and you're going to have to toe the line and be a man above reproach. And so you need to be willing to hear when I say that was over the line, even though it wouldn't be over the line for another man, but for you, you got to be careful, whether it's even just being nice and shaking a lady's hand and hugging her neck, and she's single, and that you just got to be careful, Troy. There's things that you got to do. And so he really educated me and loved me the first couple of years of our walk. But as the internet grew, again, we go back to the internet. As the internet grew, more and more people were able to find out. And Pastor Randy moved up to Ohio, and I was set to be, the assistant pastor of that church under the man who took over for Pastor Randy. And I remember having breakfast with him and his family and my family, as I remember him even looking at my boys and say, "It's pretty exciting, isn't it? Your daddy's going to be our associate pastor of the church." And so, but within 3 or 4 weeks of that, I don't know if he got counsel from somebody or what happened, but at a party that we had at one of the elders' house, the announcement was made of somebody else that was going to be the associate pastor of the church. And so that's how I found out that I wasn't going to be the associate pastor of the church. And that was pretty devastating to me. And subsequently, I did find out through that man that it was about, that he could not be associated with me, even though he knew all along, and knew even before he became a pastor, because he was the youth pastor before. So he was privy to the fact that I was a registered sex offender. He needed to be privy to that. And even before he offered me the position, he knew all that. But yet, the pressures, I guess, of other people telling him what to do, or giving him advice of what to do, he felt it was best for me not to be in that position, and that was pretty devastating for me. That was my home church, charter member there. I loved that church. So that was my first experience of this is affecting us, and I think from then on there may have been 3 other churches that either didn't welcome me from the very beginning, like, you really ought to think about looking for another church. I'm like, okay, I just started coming here, to a church that, I was their preaching pastor. I preached every Sunday. I preached every Sunday night. One of the other guys took Wednesday night. I'm doing good. Church is growing. Things are fine. My boys are up on the worship team, leading worship, and got their drums and guitar up there, keyboard, whatever. They're actively involved. And in a sudden move on a Sunday night, the elders of the church, who were all friends of mine, and all knew my situation long before they ever even opened the church. And they're the ones who came to me and said, "Hey, we want you to be the preaching pastor. We know your situation. We know all that. We're okay with that. Don't worry about it. You're our preaching pastor. We'll be senior pastors of the church. We'll handle the organization and the children's church and the different ministries, but we want you to preach for us." And so, on that Sunday night, it was a shock to me. It was like, "Hey, we just want you to know we're going to need you to pack up your stuff and get out of our church." And I was like, "What? Get out of the church?" It's like, "Yep, yeah, and get your kids, get all their equipment, and get out of our church. You're not welcome back in our church again." And I'm like, "Okay, so what's this about? I mean, somebody say something? What's going on?" "No, we just can't be associated with you anymore. You need to get out of our church." And that particular incident blew up huge. I mean, it just exploded on us, and I don't know if it's internet again that it exploded on us, but all the way from San Antonio, KSAT News came from San Antonio to Rockdale, Texas, which is where that church was at the time, and they actually sat out in front of the Walmart and stopped people coming out with my picture going, "Do you know this man? Why was he released from a local church? Do you know why this? Do you know he's a registered sex offender and he used to be a pastor of one of the local churches, and he's recently been released? Do you know if there was any accusations made against him?" And then came to my house and tried to interview you guys, my boys. And I think I was in Huntsville, I think, visiting my grandmother at the time, and I got the phone call that they were there, and I'm shocked that, this is, first off, blown into this. There was never an accusation, was never anything said, there was never any, nobody ever said that there was any kind of impropriety or any, the Bible says avoid the very appearance of sin, and there was no appearance of sin, there was nothing. It was just the fact that the church leaders were told they need to get rid of me, so they simply got rid of us. And, there were a lot of different incidences where, we were told that you either don't come to our church anymore, or you need to stand up in front of the whole congregation and tell everybody about this and let everybody be known. And, Pastor Randy told me a long time ago, nobody need to know about this, Troy. You don't need to be repeating this to people. That people don't need to know this part of your testimony. Just let it go. Live your life as a man of integrity. Dot your I's, cross your T's when it comes to this, and make sure that you're never in a position where you could be, an accusation be flown against you. And so, well, I had to stand up, and I wouldn't have done that in a church had my children not been worship leaders at the church. And by the time this actually was told for me to do, I had developed, quite a few relationships within that church, and so that was a difficult thing to do. As far as how it affected my faith, my hope is built on nothing less than Jesus Christ and His righteousness. It's not men's righteousness; it's His. And so I never put any stock on what men thought or how they treated me. Men are fallible. I've never met a man yet that I agreed with everything he said, including Pastor Randy. There's only one, and that's Jesus Christ, and what He said, I agree with everything He said. I know that people have their own demons, their own struggles that they go through, their own things that maybe happen to them or to a loved one, and hearing that somebody's a registered sex offender, I could imagine how that could spark in them some bitter feelings, some hatred, and who best to take it out on than the one that's standing in front of you. And so, I tried to emulate the Stephen thing, when he's being stoned. Lord, forgive them. They don't have any idea what these guys are doing. They don't have any idea how they're touching one of your children. And not that I'm special, but I am one of your children. And they were abusing me, and I don't want them to be held accountable for that. They got their own reasons for what they did. Just give me the strength to be the man that I'm supposed to be. Yeah. That's how I made through it.
Yeah. When
I'll take a drink.
Yeah, JC. Ooh. That's good. Yeah, I always I have a lot of friends that are pretty anti-church, and that's pretty much my answer all the time. It's like, yeah, people suck.
Yep. But
that doesn't really change. Yeah. It doesn't really change the way that I view the world or view how I should live. It's just like, that's just the framework that I put it in. It's like, yeah, people are awful, always.
Yeah.
So, well, and it's not about me, but I've always assumed the worst. Like, I'm just going to assume everybody's going to try to screw me over or be mean or whatever. But that's just in here.
Right.
But I'm going to be nice. So my expectation is I'm probably going to get hurt at some point, but I'm just safeguarding that.
Yeah.
Probably has to do with growing up.
Yeah, and I think the way I look at people is that I want to put a tin on their head and believe that they're good people, especially when they're professing to be followers of Christ. I want to believe good in people. But at the same time, I'm never surprised when the bad come out. It's like, well, we still live in an imperfect world, and we dwell in an imperfect body, and we have a finite mind, so we can't think infinitely. God wants us to think infinitely. Think about, live on purpose, amen. And what's your purpose? So, my purpose is to do everything that I can to honor Him in my relationships and my walk. Can't remember who said it. Your walk walks and your talk talks, but your walk talks more than your talk talks. It's your walk that matters. And sometimes when people treat you the worst, that's when your walk has to shine the best. Because without that, they can't see the light. It says represent Christ, but maybe we need to re-present Christ. Amen.
Yeah. Obviously, this affected you financially. And, I mean, just in the stress of doing this, fundraising and blah, 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 all the stuff that's associated to this thing.
Yeah.
I have a lot of stress, which presents itself in a lot of back pain. My back is just constantly tight. And, you were in a wheelchair for a while, always had back pain, heart attack. Do you attribute any of that to, your physical health being associated to the stress of dealing with this?
I had never thought of that, the idea that my physical condition would have an effect or be affected by my mental or stress related stuff. But over the years, I've done some researching and talked to different doctors. I saw Dr. Ganino up in Dallas, probably started seeing him in 2006, 2007 maybe, and that was one of the first things that he was sharing with me is that, you know, your mental makeup, the stuff that you've had to deal with, the struggles that you've had, they're manifesting themselves in exasperating your pain. So it's not that your pain isn't real, and it's not that you don't physically have a problem there. It's just that your stress level and your anguish that you feel over your situation has manifested itself in a physical aspect of it. And you got to figure out a way to be able to release that so that you don't let it, you know, and that was probably one of the most enlightening things that I had found for relieving some of the stress. But, you know, it's hard, you know, and until 2016, when, you know, I got exonerated, and it probably took 2 years or so for that to actually dissolve in the sense of on the web. I fought, you know, mugshot.com or whatever it was, who kept my mugshot up there, and they were like, you know, even though you've been exonerated, and I see you're on the national exoneration thing, it's still going to cost you $399 to take you off the website. And I said, well, I don't know exactly what state you're in, but you will be being contacted by a local AG who will be sure to make sure you know that that's actually extortion, and I will have you take it down. And I was kind of given that sort of advice from my attorney, who said they already got in trouble for doing that once before, so all you got to do is just get in their face about it. And they did take it down. But, you know, the stress of the internet, and then, of course, now we're no longer a registered sex offender. Now we're an exonerated registered sex offender. So you still have the story out there, and nothing you can do about taking that story out of the internet. It's there, which was, again, one of the other reasons that I went forward with the lawsuit, because if you're going to, you know, if you're still going to be out there as I'm labeled as such, even though I'm exonerated and no longer having to register, but yet the story's still out there, then I want to make the changes necessary that this doesn't happen to another man or woman. And whatever that takes to do that, you know, I'm okay with, you know, whatever. It can't be any worse than what I've already dealt with, you know. So I don't really care how people see me, other than the fact that I want them to see this was wrong, and we got to figure out a way to stop this from happening to somebody. That you can't take a guy that doesn't have any money and doesn't have any experience in the legal aspect of things and push him into a plea agreement that you would never give to somebody who actually was guilty of the crime that you're saying he was guilty of. You wouldn't give somebody 6 months probation or 10 years probation and 120 days weekend jail time. He wouldn't have to serve any time in jail. You didn't limit my contact with my own children. Every registered sex offender, most of them can't live in their own home. I mean, I know several that were in the church, but they couldn't live in their own home. You know, they had to separate from their wife and live somewhere else, or, you know, they didn't have any of that for me. So they knew I wasn't guilty of it, but they needed to get a conviction. And those are the kinds of things that have to stop in our country. We've got to stop building, you know, a career on the backs of other people. And that's exactly what, you know, the DAs are doing. There has to be some safeguards to keep these guys from having so much ultimate unrestrained power. And I don't even know if that answered your question. Because I lost what the question was.
No, yeah, I think you did. It was like a mental, physical toll.
Oh, wow, right. Well, we just went all around the world there. Yeah, I'm sorry, yeah. But yes, yeah. I certainly think, and I think so today. I think that there's a lot of aspect to even what we're doing now creates. I'd like to be able to say I don't feel any stress, and I don't, you know, but that's not true. I don't like talking about it. I don't like going back and you know, rehashing the interview, the trial part, the being kicked out of churches, all of that stuff, I've tried the best I can to put it behind me. But I do know that, well, first thing came to my mind is God's glory is revealed through your story. So first off, you need to tell your story. But change happens when stories are told. Change happens when people have an opportunity to share with other people who have no idea that this could even happen to somebody. But whenever they learn this could happen to somebody, and they hear the depth and the difficulties that it caused an entire family, there's going to be those people who are going to hear that and go, I want on this. I want to help. I know how to write legislation. I know how to whatever aspect. I got a deep pocket. I want to give to this so that change can happen. That I would never want to have to hear another story of somebody having to deal with a runaway rogue DA. Yeah, but yeah, stress is pretty intense.
Yeah. Cool. I think we need to cover exoneration, and one thing that I think public opinion is that if you're exonerated, maybe there's compensation, and everything's made right. I think that's the public opinion.
I think it is too.
They fixed it.
Yeah.
And so, I actually don't know the stats of people that have been exonerated. I know there's people that have received millions.
Yes.
I think Michael Morton was one of them.
1.9.
Yeah. Yeah. But I'm sure there is a significant amount of people that receive absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
And it's, I think to me it's that, it's a bit of a Band-Aid.
Yeah.
That they do with that. Yeah, I think walking through the exoneration story and kind of touching on how expensive it was to even fight.
Yeah.
Is probably why a lot of people don't fight.
Yeah.
Is because it costs money and they're already broke.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, those are kind of the themes that I want to touch on.
Okay.
Yeah,
I think the weeks or months after finding out that there was exculpatory evidence hidden, so we're talking October 2014. I had already paid $7,500 or so to a local attorney to help fight this and bring about change in this area. And really, again, I just thought we were just trying to get off the registry. I wasn't trying to wipe out my felony. I just didn't want people to be able to Google my name. I'd like to be able to, figure out a way to, not have all the things that happened to us happen again. But subsequently, because of what happened with Michael Morton and what Ken Anderson did to him, it shed a light for us, opened up the door for us to look into our case. And we fought Williamson County tooth and nail. It was ridiculous to me how much they fought us when they themselves brought the evidence to us and went, "I'm so sorry this happened to your client." And they could have made us whole right away. They could have just simply said, we're gonna wipe this completely off. We're gonna erase this from our record. We're gonna expunge absolutely everything. We're going to give him his complete innocence. He was not guilty of the crime, and we don't think he was guilty of the crime. We're done. I'm so sorry this happened to him. But instead, they hem-hawed. They were like, well, in the end, what they ended up saying was, well, in my petition for what they call a writ of habeas corpus, so to release me from the restraints of sex offender registration. They said that my request had twofold request. One, that I felt like I needed to be taken off of the registry and no longer a felon because the fact that exculpatory evidence was hidden from me, and that my due process rights were violated, and on that alone, I should be able to get my case thrown out. Secondly, based on exculpatory evidence and the lack of any evidence that the state had whatsoever, I was innocent of the crime, and therefore I need to be released from, my plea and everything, expunged and all that mess, or exonerated, however they put it, based on innocence. And so Williamson County came back and said, well, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll give you this. We agree with you. We agree that exculpatory evidence was certainly hidden. There was evidence that showed that you didn't commit the crime, or less likely that you did. And so we're willing to just go ahead and we'll expunge your record, or expunge is the wrong word, but we'll erase the fact that you ever had a conviction. You'll have no record whatsoever. You won't be a registered sex offender. Everything is done. We'll wipe it all away. As to your second request, because we've approved the first, reviewing the second request of actual innocence is not necessary for us to do. So that meant that they didn't have to address whether or not I was actually innocent. And the reason that they did that is because if you're actually declared actually innocent, then you get access to the billions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars in Texas that is stored in a fund waiting for exonerees to be able to gain access to that money. But you have to be declared actually innocent. And the way Williamson County got around it is because my petition had 2 pleas in it. And they took the first one and said, because we've agreed with the first one, we do not need to or required to address the second. We're going to agree with that on the first account alone. And it was like they were saying, oh, we don't. It was a way of them going, well, why even address the second? Because we agree with the first thing that you're saying. Absolutely, this needs to be turned over. We can't believe this happened to you. I'm so sorry this happened to you. We're going to wipe it all away. But after it was all said and done, we realized what they were actually doing was keeping Williamson County from being listed in the counties of the people like Dallas and Houston who have had to pay millions of dollars, or Travis County having to pay millions of dollars to exonerees. And so there began, more of the fight and more money for attorneys and fees and different things that we had to do in order to be able to try to get our case brought back up, in the sense of, no, we want that second part of it to be addressed as well. You don't just get to do the first one, sign that off, and the judge sign it, and that be the end of it. Go back and address the second part of it. And so I think we're close to $52,000 that we ended up dumping into all of this over the course of the years. And then, not to mention, after the exoneration, now we're talking about multiple. I don't even want to begin to, Jeff Edwards and the Edwards Law Firm, Sumter and Gonzalez, their law firm out of Austin, Kristen Eder, who was the lead attorney on my case, David Gonzalez, who helps run Sumter and Gonzalez. The amount of hours that they all put in getting my case before Williamson County, and then ultimately before the Fifth Circuit, and then pushing it all the way up to the Supreme Court. I cannot imagine how much money was dumped in that part of it. And so, it takes a lot of money to be able to fight. And thank God for people like the Innocent Project, who go, we're going to do this pro bono. But most of the Innocent Project deals with either death row, lifers in prison, people who are currently incarcerated, rather than the sex offender who's out there who never committed the crime. Whether it be the guy that was, he's been released, but he was accused of murder, and he's a felon because he was listed as a murderer, and you can Google that and see that about him. But yet he was innocent of the crime. But so really, hope that, maybe even through some of this that we're doing with this documentary, that there'll be more nonprofits that'll step up, more attorneys that'll step up, more paralegals that'll step up and go, I'm willing to take on that case that's old, and yes, it's over with, but it still haunted this man and his family. That his kids had to grow up in school that your daddy's a murderer when he wasn't, and we need to make that right. People people think that well, because this happened to you, you must have really came into some big money. In fact, we went to a Thanksgiving, I think, in Victoria, visiting with some of my wife Amy's family, and one of the family members came out to see our new vehicle, which was not new. It was 5 years old, 4 years old at the time, but it was an Infiniti, and a nice looking vehicle. My payments were $700 a month, so yeah, nice vehicle. Amazing that Amy and I could be able to first off afford that. But they walked out and was like, wow, they must have really paid you good, nice car. And I'm like, dude, I didn't get a penny yet. I didn't get nothing. I'm still fighting them. I haven't gotten a thing. And as we sit here today, 5 years later, I still hadn't gotten a penny. And that really does stick in my craw. It's like I don't really get that. You admit what you did was wrong. Everybody in the world who looks at the case can see that it was wrong. And why aren't you willing? I mean, the state of Texas has the money already in account, earmarked for exonerees. Why wouldn't you? And how many other people have counties done this to, where they've said, well, based on your different counts that you're asking, we're just going to go ahead and agree with your first one. Yeah, absolutely, we ought to erase that. So we don't even need to address the other ones, because clearly you need to have this turned over. And if you look at the exoneree list, you can see a whole bunch of them that say legal adjudication, or I don't remember what the wording is exactly. I guess I probably should have known that before I started speaking about it. But there's a list on there. Instead of saying actual innocence, it says a judicial exoneration. So that means that there was a reason behind it, but they didn't go all the way to innocent. Well, the reason they don't go all the way to innocent is because it's exactly what they did to me. They take the first count and say, well, you're right. So there's no sense in us even looking at the second count, because the second count doesn't matter, because we already agree what the second count is asking us to do is to turn over your case. We're going to do that already. So turned over. Of course, I was looking for the fact that I didn't want to be a registered sex offender, and at this point, I didn't want to be a felon, and the fact that I knew what you hid, exonerate the heck out of me. You bet. But I didn't have any idea that meant, that there would be no compensation whatsoever, which is one of the reasons we filed a 1985 or 1982 civil rights action against him, which was denied at the Supreme Court. A whole other subject. I don't know if I answered your question.
No, yep, that's great. Yeah, I think that's great. I think that covers just about all that we want to cover. Is there anything more that you want to share about what's happening right now, or kind of what your thoughts are? And I know that you've talked a bit about working with Innocence Project to either, I guess, mentor. I don't know exactly what you would be doing with them.
Yeah.
Or anything that you are doing to kind of push the ball even further, to continue to fight for those that have been wrongfully convicted.
Well, I think my first thoughts about what more can be done than doing this documentary and the podcast, Clear the Record, and getting out there and trying to bring awareness to an issue. I think about all the different things that are out there as far as the injustices that are in our criminal justice system, and they are immense, and there's a lot of them, and they're devastating to those that are caught up in them. But how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And the bite that I'm taking on is plea bargains and plea agreements, and how prosecutors can abuse their power by forcing people into a plea. And so that's really my focus that I'm focused on. I know the Innocence Project is working on a kind of offshoot of them, that it will be working with plea agreements and looking into whether or not somebody was either railroaded, or whether or not evidence was held against or hidden from them. I think my next step, not that anybody needs to know this, and you can certainly cut it out, but I've just recently finished my associate's degree in biblical studies, and I have one course left that I need to take on Christian counseling, and then I'll be finished with what I feel like I need in that aspect of my life right now, and that part. And then I think my next step is to be to go through the process of being a paralegal, so that I have rights to be able to look at things that a normal citizen doesn't have a right to look at. But as a paralegal, if I can marry an attorney, in the sense of I work for, whether it be research that I do for them as a paralegal, that'll open the door for me to be able to review a lot of cases that right now you can't review unless you have a bar license or a bar number that you work under. And so that's probably my next step, is that there's a couple of classes in Houston that you can take for 6 months or so that it takes for you to get a paralegal certificate, which is really kind of strange because in Texas there isn't really even a license to be a paralegal. It's just kind of weird. But yeah, I think that for me, I think that's probably my next biggest step, is to do that. And then I want to get into legislation writing. If I can't prop back open the door for me to go to the Supreme Court and change this across the country in one fell swoop, which is part of what I'm also doing, is trying to get more of the information from Williamson County and Round Rock PD. At the time that we were fighting Round Rock PD, Greg Abbott, our current governor, was the AG of Texas, and he had denied us access to my file. And Round Rock PD cited a number of different what I thought was very weak reasoning for not giving me the file. If it was because you didn't want me to know the child's name, well, she was my neighbor in the area. I don't just know her name; I know her parents' name. So that's not really the issue. And if you need to black anything out, I'm okay. I'm ex-military. I've read a lot of files that were blacked out. So black out whatever you feel like you need to black out, but show me the truth about my file. And so I really feel like if there's something that way we could open that door back up, then I want to be able to do that research to open back the door up to possibly turn over that way. Otherwise, I need to marry some guys or learn more about writing legislation or rewriting legislation, so that I can step into not just Texas, but Louisiana and Mississippi, and then move on to Virginia, West Virginia. Well, West Virginia's Supreme Court just passed a ruling which changed that in West Virginia, and that's good. But yeah, just making sure that every state in our country, if the Supreme Court were to step up and do their job, then it's our job as citizens of this country to step up and make the changes necessary to make our justice system equal for everyone under the law. Not doesn't matter on how much money you make, or race, color, creed, sexual orientation. None of that should matter. It ought to be equal for everybody, and it's not right now in a number of different areas. But I'm focusing on plea agreements and exculpatory evidence hidden by rogue DAs. So yeah, that's my next step. That's the direction I want to go. And some of this is going to fuel that. Some of this is going to open up doors. I don't have the money to be able to go to the school that I want to go to, but I have a feeling that doors are going to open, that I'll be able to go to that school. And God's going to provide a way, however that way happens. But yeah.
Great. Last thing.
Oh, so sorry. I didn't drop it in the water.
That's good.
Thank you. All right.
Still on.
It appears to be, yes.
Yep. Last thing would be, twofold. Someone that's watching this might be going through the interrogation process and the whole rigmarole of dealing with people that are lying about what they did.
Right.
So, words of wisdom for that. And then the second portion would be fellow people that have been wrongfully convicted, maybe are currently wrongfully convicted, not exonerated.
Yeah.
Words of wisdom for them, or encouragement, or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Given that the isolation of it all, I really want them to feel seen and heard, and from a place of understanding.
Yeah. Well, I think if I had to speak to two different groups, I think the first group would be those who are maybe currently under indictment, facing charges for a crime that they didn't commit, and the prosecution has stacked charges against you and is threatening all kinds of things, and yet at the same time offering a lower sentencing to get you to take a plea. I would tell you to take a step back, and if you did not do what they're accusing you of, then stand your ground. The reason they're forcing you into a plea is because they don't want to go to trial. And I understand that trials are expensive, but your life is worth it. And it better be in debt to an attorney than to be in debt to the state of Texas or any state with years of your life and your potential being snuffed out because these DAs are threatening you. And so that's the advice I give to somebody who's being accused of a crime they didn't commit. Don't take the plea. Fight them. Fight them. Fight them. Fight them. Fight them. Don't quit. Now, I say all that, and yet I know what it feels like to be in that position where somebody's relying on you, and if you fight and lose, you're not just hurting you, you're hurting somebody else. And so get a hold of an attorney, get a good one. Get multiple advice, don't just take the advice of one. If you're a praying man, pray about it. Let the Lord lead you. And, look us up. We know people who can help. And if we don't know people who can help, we'll find somebody that can help. Because you shouldn't have to take a plea when you didn't do what you did, or what they say you did. So that's the first group that I think I'd like to say something to. For the other group, who is those who either have already pled or maybe even at trial were found guilty, but you didn't do what they said you did. I would tell you to keep fighting, and I know what it's like to feel so deeply disappointed in the outcome of your life at the hands of somebody else. That it's not a poor decision that you made. It's one thing when you get behind the wheel of a car drunk and you hit somebody, and you made that decision to take that first drink. You made the decision to get in your car and drive, and you made the decision that cost somebody their life. Okay, those are decisions you made. But when somebody's fabricating evidence against you in order to get you guilty of a crime that you didn't commit, that's not something you did. That's something somebody else did. So it's the only thing that kept me sound outside my relationship with the Lord was the fact that I didn't do this. And I will stand tall regardless of what people say about me. So keep your wits about you. Stay true and don't stop fighting. No matter how old your case is, don't stop fighting. There's a podcast out there called Clearing the Record. Give us a call. Let's look into your case. Maybe there's something there that will exonerate you. And finally, you can get your peace back. Maybe it'll restore a relationship with somebody who does think that you're guilty, but only because the state said you were. And you're not. And if you're not, don't stop fighting. Keep fighting.
Yeah, I think that's good. I like the idea of everybody that is being pushed into a plea. Because it's 98%, right?
Yeah.
2% go to trial.
96.4 state countrywide.
Yeah.
Last time I looked.
So if even half of that, whatever that is, 48, something like that, court system would be so bogged down with trials.
Yeah.
Which that's why they do pleas.
That's exactly why they do please.
That they would be forced to deal with the issue.
Yeah.
And so to me, that's a way of like public force, of like revolt. We're not going to take this anymore. We're going to fight back and make you go through the whole thing of it all that you're trying to avoid.
Yeah. Well, when I think about the criminal process, and I didn't at 25 had no idea what that criminal process is. I know every aspect of the criminal process. I feel like I do. I read a lot. If you talk to any of my attorneys, they say he's like a dog on a freaking bone, man. He's just a reader. My thoughts about changing the law and putting these constraints on the DAs where they can't use, these tactics that they're currently using, hiding exculpatory evidence, I think you'll have less indictments. Because I think if a DA knows that I am required to turn over all evidence that I have, I'm not even going to go to the grand jury with this because I don't have enough to be able to convict. And I have evidence that possibly he didn't do it. So, okay, we're not even going to take this to grand jury. So now we're going to have less indictments and less people being accused of a crime because the DAs are now being held to a standard where they can't cheat. And if I can't cheat, well, maybe I better not take the case because I'm worried about my career. And so if my career's on the line and I can't cheat anymore to be able to stack my numbers that look at all my conviction rates, well, I still need to have good conviction rates. And the way to do that is stop indicting people that I'm questioning whether or not I can find them guilty of the crime. And that's actually the standard that everybody's supposed to be under when it comes to DAs, whether it be federal or whether it be state. They have a responsibility not to bring a case before the court that they themselves do not believe they can win, and without cheating. And in some of our states, they can still cheat. And so I think that's really the way. I mean, obviously right now the revolting part of it is important. So that's people standing up for their rights and going, I am not going to let you railroad me into this plea. Let's go to trial, and force them to go to a trial. Once the trial starts, you'll get more information than you ever wanted about your case. And I know that now, didn't know that then. But once the trial actually starts, the DA is under some real obligation by the court system without being sanctioned for not giving over certain information, because now it's a trial right. And there are 10 states who don't believe that exculpatory evidence is a trial. They believe it's only a trial right and not a plea right. All the other states believe that it's a plea right. So it's a right to exculpatory evidence before you accept a plea. In 10 states, it's only a right to exculpatory evidence if you go to trial. So as long as I get you before you ever go to trial, 96.4% of them throughout the country don't go to trial. So if I can get you in to accept a plea during that time, I can still hide this exculpatory evidence I have because it's not your right in the state that I live in. And those are the laws that need to change. So people need to realize where they live. What are the laws where they live? If you need to know, clearing the record, give us a holler. But the state that you live in makes the difference, because if you live in Oklahoma, you can't take a plea without them giving you exculpatory evidence. But if you live in Texas, man, they can railroad you up one side and down the other, and you're just stuck with it because they can hide exculpatory evidence from you. So I think that it's an important thing to think about if you're facing a criminal accusation. Is what state do I live in? What are the laws that I'm currently in? And yes, I ought to take it to trial. If you're worried about whether or not you can take a plea after a trial starts, happens all the time. People get their whole case put before them. They're able to get all the discovery and more importantly, any exculpatory or inculpatory, meaning that there is evidence showing you're guilty. That's inculpatory. And you get that evidence and you look at it. Now you're able to actually see the case that they have and go, okay, this doesn't look good. Okay, all right. So I was there, but I didn't do what they said I did. I was just sitting out in the car, but I didn't go in, and so I'm not the guy who swung the hammer, but I was there, and so maybe I need to talk to them about a plea. Okay, well then, deal with that, but don't confess to something you didn't do. Don't allow them to do that to you. It takes the wind right out of your sails, man. So, stand your ground. It's the only life you got to live. Yeah. I wish I would have had that advice back then. So.
Cool. Last thing that I want to do for behind the scenes stuff, I have to get up.
You guys aware of the Michael Morton Act?
Yes.
Yes.
So it seems like the Michael Morton Act is a solve for this.
No.
Notwithstanding any other provision in this article, the state shall disclose to the defendant any exculpatory, impeachment, or mitigating document or information in possession, custody, or control of the state that tends to negate the guilt of the defendant or would reduce the punishment for the offense charged.
Yes. At trial.
Oh, it's still at trial?
Yep. Yeah, the Michael Morton Act only addresses trial rights.
And same with the Brady law.
Yeah.
But then, yeah, why would they need the Michael Morton Act if the Brady rule applies?
Clarification in each state, and so that's state legislation act, and so that's just a way for the state to be able to make sure everybody knows, hey, it is required of you. The Michael Morton Act now makes it legislatively. You are in violation of state legislation if you do not release all exculpatory evidence at trial. And so there's plenty of, area people who have done, hid evidence, exculpatory evidence during the trial, like they did with Michael Morton. And so what that Michael Morton Act does is it basically, two things. What the Michael Morton Act does is it puts another layer of responsibility on the DAs to follow the rules. And that's just a whole new rule that the state legislation has now developed, not Congress or the Supreme Court through the Brady Act. That's number one. That notwithstanding any other, I hate that wording, and it's in every one of those evidentiary clauses in legislation. It's like, well, notwithstanding any other provision in this section. And so when you go back and look at some of the other provisions, and it's like, well, that for example, in one of them it says that the DA does not have to turn over in exculpatory or inculpatory evidence that is work product. So if I have my internal DA investigator go investigate the crime and he finds evidence that he didn't do it, I don't have to turn that over to you. That's the notwithstanding wording in that. So it goes, and then you have to go back and look at the other provisions and go, holy cow, right here it says that I don't have to turn that over if it's work product of the DA. Well, why is that even in there? If it's still exculpatory, it's exculpatory. Why are we excluding the work product of the DA? If it's exculpatory, it's exculpatory. Why can you hide it because it's your work product? It doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
It's that kind of wording that has to be taken out of this. It's legal jargon to create another little loophole for them to continue to work in. But yeah, Michael Morton Act was great. I think it was a wonderful legislation that put another layer of responsibility on those DAs. And I don't know what consequences would happen to a DA if they violate the Michael Morton Act, but it is a state legislation. So it's not a circuit thing. It's not Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi. It's strictly a state of Texas legislation, the Michael Morton Act. So
Yeah, interesting.
yeah, I'd love to create a Troy Mansfield Act
Yeah.
that talks about pleas. And
Michael
that,
Morton's still alive?
yeah, well, yeah.
Were you contacted? What did he say?
Yeah, he's not doing anything. Yeah,
He doesn't do any.
he said he didn't want to do it anymore. I think after what he did at UT, he's quit. He didn't want to do that anymore. He had a pretty good, I don't know if you've seen his stage thing where he was up there with the Innocence Project and others and had that interview. I think he's ready to get on with his life.
Yeah.
I'm done. I did the Michael Morton Act. I've done what I can do. I'm out. Yeah. But We can always send him a link,
Yeah.
you know,
Okay.
try to get him involved, even if it's in the back door. You know, that you don't have to be on camera. You don't have, but
Right.
you know, point us in the direction of legislation people that can help. But anyway, so are we pretty much done.
Yes, we are done. Yeah. Great. Cool. Alright. This setup, great job, Grant.
Oh, thanks, man.
I like it. I like it a lot. Okay.
Mason, give me a hand, please.
Yes. Hold on, let me move this so you have room.